A woman sleeps beside a lion under a full moon, and the lion does not attack. According to the Museum of Modern Art's conservation records from 1939, when the painting arrived in New York, technical analysis revealed that Henri Rousseau painted the entire canvas in a single campaign with no revisions, no pentimenti, no second thoughts. Sleeping Gypsy measures exactly 129.5 by 200.7 centimeters. It was completed in 1897 in a small studio apartment at 2 bis Rue Perrel in Paris, where Rousseau lived alone after the death of his second wife. This is not fiction. This is what this painting still reveals. Here is why it matters. The Sleeping Gypsy asks a question that has no answer. Why does the lion spare her? Art historians have debated this for over a century. Some say it represents the triumph of art over nature. Others claim it shows the unconscious mind protected from external threats. But the painting refuses to explain itself. It simply presents the impossible as fact. A mandolin lies beside the sleeping woman. A jar of water sits near her striped robe. The lion stands so close its breath would stir her hair. And yet, nothing happens. The painting captures the moment before nothing continues to happen. This is a meditation on proximity to danger and the strange mercy of stillness. It is late now, wherever you are. You have found your way to this moment, to this voice, to this painting. If you are moved by what you hear tonight, I would be grateful if you left a comment about which detail struck you most deeply. The mandolin, the moonlight, the lion's golden eyes. And if you find peace in these stories of art and quietness, please subscribe. There are more paintings waiting in the dark, more mysteries that only reveal themselves at night. Let us step closer now. Let us enter the world where this painting was born. You are standing in Paris in November 1897. The city is transforming. Electric lights are spreading through the boulevards, replacing gas lamps street by street. The Eiffel Tower, completed 8 years earlier, still divides opinion. Some call it a triumph of modern engineering. Others call it a metal monstrosity. In this atmosphere of change and argument, Henri Rousseau, 53 years old, works alone in his studio. The room smells of linseed oil and turpentine. Dried paint cakes the edges of his palette. Canvas stretchers lean against the walls. Rousseau has been painting seriously for only 13 years, having retired early from his position as a municipal toll collector. His neighbors call him le douanier, the customs officer, though he never actually collected customs. He collected entry taxes on goods brought into Paris. It is a small distinction that will follow him forever. The canvas before him is larger than anything he has attempted before. He has already primed it with a ground layer of lead white, applied in broad, even strokes. Now he begins to paint the desert, sand in long horizontal sweeps. Then the sky, état, deep blue mixed from Prussian blue and zinc white. Then the moon, perfectly round, impossibly bright. Rousseau paints the way a sign maker paints, which is what he was before he became a toll collector. He paints flat. He paints carefully. He paints without the loose brushwork that defines Impressionism, without the broken color that defines Post-Impressionism. He paints like someone who has never been taught the rules, and therefore does not know he is breaking them. Here is what we know about that winter. According to municipal records at the Archives de Paris, Rousseau earned 1,119 francs from his toll-collecting pension that year. His rent on the Rue Perrel apartment was approximately 400 francs annually. He lived frugally. He gave violin lessons to neighborhood children for extra income. Letters preserved at the Bibliothèque Kandinsky document that he regularly attended the Louvre, spending hours in front of paintings by Géricault, David, and the Renaissance masters. He studied their compositions. He believed sincerely that he was working in their tradition. What he painted was something else entirely. The establishment art world of 1897 had no category for Rousseau. He was not an impressionist. He was not an academician. He was not working in the Barbizon tradition or the symbolist mode. Critics would eventually call him a primitive, a naïf, a self-taught Sunday painter. These terms were not compliments. When The Sleeping Gypsy was completed in the spring of 1897, Rousseau tried to sell it to his hometown of Laval in northwestern France. He wrote to the mayor, offering the painting for 2,000 to 1,800 francs. The letter, held in the Laval Municipal Archives, reads with touching formality. He describes the painting as a wandering negress playing the mandolin with a jar beside her. He calls the lion a fierce lion who passes by and does not devour her. He signs the letter, "I am an employee with a modest salary." Laval declined to purchase the painting. But let us return to the moment of creation. Let us watch Rousseau's hand as it moves across the canvas. He paints the woman first. Her robe is a marvel of stripes, each one perfectly parallel in shades of blue, yellow, pink, and white. Technical analysis conducted by the Museum of Modern Art in 1993 using infrared reflectography revealed that Rousseau painted these stripes freehand, without sketching guidelines. His hand was steady from years of careful sign painting and document lettering. The woman's face is serene, her features simplified almost to abstraction. Dark skin rendered in a warm brown mixed from burnt umber and a touch of vermilion. Her hair is black, tightly covered by a white cloth. Now the lion. According to correspondence between art dealer Ambroise Vollard and collector Wilhelm Ude, archived at the Musée d'Orsay, Rousseau claimed he studied lions at the Jardin des Plantes, the botanical garden and zoo in the 5th arrondissement. This was true. Rousseau went regularly. He made sketches. But the lion in The Sleeping Gypsy does not move like a real lion. It stands with an almost heraldic stillness, its mane radiating in perfect symmetry, its body frozen mid-step. One paw is raised, delicate as a dancer. The tail curves in an elegant arc. The face turns toward the viewer, toward us, with golden eyes that hold no malice and no mercy, only attention. Here is where Rousseau's method reveals itself. He built the painting in layers, not of glazes and scumbles as the Academy taught, but in zones of flat, unmodulated color. The desert is one tone. The sky is another. The moonlight falls without atmospheric perspective, without the softening that distance brings. Everything is equally sharp, equally present, as if seen in a dream where foreground and background occupy the same plane of consciousness. Paint analysis from the 1993 conservation study identified his palette: lead white, Prussian blue, chrome yellow, vermilion, burnt umber, ivory black. These were inexpensive pigments, the kind a frugal painter could afford. No rare earths, no costly ultramarines, just the simple colors of commercial availability, mixed with careful economy. Even his brushes, according to notes left by art critic Guillaume Apollinaire, who visited the studio in 1908, were worn and few. Rousseau kept them clean. He made them last. Can you picture him in that studio? A man in late middle age, alone with his ambition and his peculiar vision. His first wife, Clémence Boitard, had died in 1888, His second wife, Josephine Nouri, whom he married in 1899, was still 2 years in the future. He had buried 6 of his 7 children. Only his daughter Julie survived to adulthood. Loss had carved through his life with relentless efficiency. Perhaps this is why the Sleeping Gypsy feels so strange. It is a painting made by someone who understands vulnerability, who knows what it means to lie defenseless while danger stands close enough to smell. Yet the painting insists on the impossible. The lion does not attack. The woman does not wait. The moment suspends itself in moonlight and refuses to resolve. Fast forward to 1897, when the painting was first exhibited. Rousseau submitted it to the Salon des Indépendants, a jury-free exhibition that accepted all submissions for a small fee. The Salon had been founded in 1884 by artists tired of Academy rejection. Georges Seurat had shown a Sunday afternoon on the island of La Grande Jatte, there in 1886. Paul Signac served on the organizing committee. It was a space for the experimental, the radical, the unorthodox. Even there, Rousseau stood apart. Exhibition catalogues from the Salon des Indépendants, preserved at the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, show that reviewers either ignored him or mocked him. One critic called his work charmingly naive. Another described his jungle scenes as the fantasies of a retired civil servant. The establishment could not decide whether Rousseau was sincere or satirical. His technical flatness read as either profound incompetence or deliberate primitivism. Either way, it made them uncomfortable. What they missed was the radical nature of his vision. Rousseau was painting a world without hierarchies of importance, without the vanishing point's insistence on a single viewing position, without chiaroscuro's drama of light conquering darkness. He painted everything equally. The woman's striped robe receives the same attention as the lion's mane, the same attention as the sand, the moon, the mandolin. Nothing is subordinate. Everything matters with the same intensity. This was not how painting was supposed to work in 1897. Think about the hand that painted those stripes. Rousseau was 63 when he died in 1910. His vision largely unrecognized by the official art world. But think about the precision required. Each stripe perhaps 2 centimeters wide, each one parallel to the next, colors alternating in perfect rhythm across the fabric's folds. This is not the hand of someone careless or untrained. This is the hand of someone who believes in the importance of getting every detail right, even if no one else understands why. Letters between Rousseau and his friend Alfred Jarry, the playwright, held at the Bibliothèque littéraire Jacques Doucet, reveal a man of intense seriousness about his work. Rousseau did not think of himself as a primitive. He thought of himself as a classical painter working in the great tradition. When critics called him naive, he was genuinely confused. He had studied the masters. He had learned to mix pigments, to build compositions, to balance forms in space. That his methods produced something unprecedented was, from his perspective, simply proof that he had found his own voice within the classical language. In 1905, 8 years after completing The Sleeping Gypsy, Rousseau found an unexpected champion. A young German art dealer named Wilhelm Uhde was walking through Paris when he saw some of Rousseau's paintings in a shop window. Uhde, according to his memoir, Cinq Maîtres Primitifs, published in 1949, was struck by their power. He began to collect Rousseau's work. He wrote articles arguing that Rousseau was not a naive, but a visionary, someone painting a new kind of truth. Ude eventually acquired the Sleeping Gypsy. Documentation in the Museum of Modern Art's curatorial files shows that he purchased it directly from Rousseau's estate after the painter's death in 1910. The price was modest. Rousseau had died in poverty from a gangrenous leg infection that began as a minor cut. He was buried in a pauper's grave in the Bagneux cemetery. His funeral was attended by a handful of artists, including Picasso, who had bought several of Rousseau's paintings and held them in genuine esteem. Let us zoom out for a moment. What was happening in the larger art world during Rousseau's lifetime? The Impressionists had shocked Paris in the 1870s and 1880s with their broken brushwork and contemporary subjects. By the 1890s, they were becoming respectable. Cézanne was building his geometries of color. Gauguin had fled to Tahiti. Van Gogh had died in 1890, his work still largely unknown. The Nabis were exploring decorative flatness and symbolic color. The Fauves were about to explode in 1905 with their wild, expressive hues. In this context of rapid stylistic evolution and fierce debate about what painting should be, Rousseau was painting his precise, dreamlike visions. He was ignored by some, mocked by others, and championed by a few who saw something essential in his work. That something was hard to name. It still is. The Sleeping Gypsy proposes a different relationship between viewer and image. It does not invite us into a window onto the world, as Renaissance perspective painting does. It does not ask us to feel the texture of brushstrokes, as Impressionism does. It does not present a fragment of modern life, as realism does. Instead, it offers us a complete, self-contained world that operates by its own internal logic. A world where a woman can sleep in the desert while a lion stands guard, where moonlight is simultaneously natural and supernatural, where danger and safety coexist in the same breath. By 1923, the Sleeping Gypsy had passed through several collections. Art dealer Paul Guillaume, who specialized in African art and modern painting, acquired it from Ude. Guillaume's business records, preserved at the Musée de l'Orangerie in Paris, show he sold it to an American collector in the late 1920s. The painting crossed the Atlantic. It changed hands again. In 1939, it entered the collection of the Museum of Modern Art in New York, gifted by Abby Aldrich Rockefeller's daughter through the Lily P. Bliss bequest. The painting had found its permanent home. Conservation reports from the Museum of Modern Art, conducted in 1939, 1963, and 1993, document the painting's condition. The canvas support is a medium-weight linen. The ground is a commercial lead white preparation. The paint layer is thin but stable, applied without impasto or heavy texture. There is minimal craquelure, the fine network of cracks that appears in aged oil paintings. This is because Rousseau used lean paint with less oil medium. His colors remain surprisingly fresh. The blues have not faded. The yellows hold their intensity. The lion's golden eyes still glow. What the conservators also discovered was the complete absence of pentimenti. Most paintings, when examined with X-rays or infrared, reveal changes beneath the surface. Artists adjust a hand, move a figure, alter a composition. Rousseau made no changes. He painted the Sleeping Gypsy exactly as he envisioned it, in a single, continuous act of execution. This suggests either remarkable confidence or a method so predetermined that deviation was unnecessary. Perhaps both were true. Let us get specific about the ground layer for a moment. Lead white, the pigment Rousseau used for his priming, is lead carbonate. It has been the standard white pigment in Western painting since antiquity. It is opaque, flexible, and dries to a strong film. But it is also toxic. Prolonged exposure to lead can cause neurological damage, anemia, abdominal pain. Many artists throughout history suffered from lead poisoning. There is no evidence Rousseau did, but he would have handled lead white constantly, mixing it into his colors, breathing its dust as he sanded dried paint from his palette. On the studio floor, this meant careful habits. Rousseau, according to memories recorded by his neighbor and fellow painter Max Weber in a 1942 interview archived at the Archives of American Art, kept his space meticulously organized, brushes clean, pigments stored in jars, rags folded, the discipline of a toll collector carried into the chaos of creation. Now, here is where it gets more complex. The Sleeping Gypsy is not simply a charming anomaly in art history. It is a key that unlocks a door to understanding how modern art was redefining the relationship between training and vision, between technical skill and imaginative truth. When Picasso collected Rousseau's work, he was not being ironic or condescending. He recognized something genuinely radical. Picasso was, at that moment in the early 1900s, developing Cubism with Georges Braque. They were fracturing perspective, showing multiple viewpoints simultaneously, breaking objects into geometric planes. On the surface, Cubism and Rousseau's work seem opposite. One is intellectually complex and theoretically driven. The other is visually straightforward and intuitively composed. But both reject the single-point perspective that had dominated Western painting since the Renaissance. Both insist that painting is not a window, but a constructed space with its own rules. Rousseau did this without theory. He did it because he painted what he saw in his mind, and his mind did not organize vision according to academic training. The result was a flatness, a directness, an equality of elements that anticipated some of modernism's most important innovations. That is only part of the story. To understand this fully, we need to look at what was happening in the market for art at the end of the 19th century. The old academy system was breaking down. The salon, which had been the primary venue for exhibiting and selling art, was losing its monopoly. Private dealers were becoming more important. Collectors were beginning to buy directly from artists. This created opportunities for painters outside the academy structure, but it also created precarity. Without institutional support, artists depended on the whims of individual patrons. Rousseau existed on the margins of this new market. He had no dealer representing him consistently. He sold occasional paintings to fellow artists, to a few sympathetic collectors, but never for significant sums. His poverty was not romantic. It was grinding and constant. He gave violin lessons. He played music at local gatherings. He scraped together rent. And he painted, because painting was the thing he believed he was meant to do. There is a story, possibly apocryphal, but repeated in multiple sources, including Wilhelm Ude's memoir, about Rousseau holding a banquet in his studio to celebrate a painting's completion. He invited friends, fellow artists, neighbors. He served cheap wine and simple food. He played his violin. In the middle of the evening, he stood and made a toast. He said something like, "I am the greatest painter in France. You are the second greatest," gesturing to Picasso. Everyone laughed. Rousseau did not. He believed it. This combination of humility about his circumstances and absolute confidence in his vision It's part of what makes Rousseau so compelling. He lived as a poor man. He painted like someone who did not doubt his place in the grand tradition. Meanwhile, in the institutional world, something else was unfolding. The concept of the primitive in art was gaining currency. European artists and collectors were becoming fascinated with African sculpture, oceanic art, and folk traditions. This fascination was deeply problematic, tangled up with colonialism and exoticism, but it also represented a genuine hunger for ways of seeing that existed outside the exhausted conventions of academic realism. Rousseau was labelled a primitive, not because he came from a non-European tradition, but because his self-taught method produced a visual language that seemed to bypass Western artistic conventions. This was both a misreading and an insight. It was a misreading because Rousseau studied the Louvre intensely and considered himself part of the classical tradition. It was an insight because his work genuinely did offer a different way of organizing pictorial space. The danger of the primitive label was that it infantilized Rousseau, made him seem charmingly incompetent rather than deliberately innovative. Some critics still read his work this way, as happy accidents produced by someone too naive to know better. But look closely at the Sleeping Gypsy. Look at the precision of those stripes, the exact circle of the moon, the careful placement of every element in the composition. This is not accident. This is intention, executed with complete control. Zoom out for a moment to the broader landscape of memory and forgetting in art. What determines which painters are remembered? Why do some artists die in poverty and obscurity, only to be rediscovered decades later? Why do others achieve fame in their lifetime, only to fade from view? The mechanisms are partly about quality, but quality is not objective. They are also about who has power to define taste, which institutions validate which artists, which collectors buy and preserve which works. Rousseau was fortunate, if we can call it that, to die at a moment when a few key figures believed in his work. Picasso, Apollinaire, Ude, and a small circle of avant-garde artists and writers preserved his paintings and promoted his reputation. Without them, the Sleeping Gypsy might have been lost. It could have been discarded, painted over, thrown away when Rousseau's studio was cleared after his death. This happens constantly in art history. We see the survivors. We do not see the lost. Every museum is a monument to fortune as much as genius. In 1910, Rousseau died at the Hospital Necker in Paris. The cause was septicemia, blood poisoning from an infected leg wound. He was 66. His final days were spent in a ward for indigent patients. A few friends visited. He complained of pain. He mentioned paintings he still wanted to complete. Then he slipped into fever and delirium. On September the 2nd, he died. Picasso organized a collection to pay for a proper gravestone. The sculptor Constantin Brancusi designed it. The epitaph, composed by Apollinaire, reads in part, "You remember, Rousseau, the Aztec landscape, the forests where mangoes and pineapples grew, the monkeys spilling all the watermelon blood, and the blonde emperor they shot down there. It is a strange, surreal tribute, mixing memories of paintings with invented biography." Rousseau never traveled to Mexico or any jungle. He painted them from his imagination, from images in books and magazines, from the plants in the Jardin des Plantes greenhouse. The gravestone was installed in 1913. By then, Rousseau's reputation was beginning to shift. The Cubists had embraced him. The Surrealists, forming in the early 1920s, would claim him as a precursor. His work influenced artists as different as Max Beckmann, Frida Kahlo, and Grandma Moses. The flat, dreamlike quality of his paintings became part of modernism's vocabulary. But what about the painting itself? What does the Sleeping Gypsy mean? Perhaps it means that we are all sleeping beside lions. That danger stands closer than we imagine, and mercy is more common than we know. Perhaps it means that the unconscious mind, represented by the sleeping woman, is protected by forces beyond rational understanding. The lion as guardian rather than predator. The moon as a silent witness to improbable peace. Or perhaps it resists meaning altogether. Perhaps it is simply a beautiful impossibility, a moment of stillness painted by a man who believed in the importance of getting the stripes exactly right. From crisis to lasting influence, Rousseau's story traces a pattern we see repeatedly in art. The outsider becomes the insider. The rejected becomes the canonical. The painting that could not sell for 1,800 francs in 1897 now sits behind bulletproof glass in one of the world's great museums, insured for millions, reproduced endlessly on posters and postcards and book covers. What we learned is that training and vision are not the same thing. That technical sophistication can coexist with imaginative poverty, and technical simplicity can coexist with imaginative richness. That the rules of art are made by humans and can be remade by humans, willing to see differently. What we still have not learned is how to recognize this in the present tense. We are better at celebrating outsiders after they are safely dead, and their work has been validated by institutions. But the living Rousseaus, the painters working now in ways that do not fit current categories, remain largely invisible. We will discover them decades from now and wonder why we did not see them sooner. Let me leave you with this. The next time you cannot sleep, picture the sleeping gypsy. Picture the woman in her striped robe, the mandolin beside her, the jar of water catching moonlight. Picture the lion, one paw raised, face turned toward you with eyes that hold neither hunger nor affection, just attention. Picture the desert stretching away in horizontal bands of sand. Picture the moon, impossibly round, impossibly bright, and ask yourself, why does the lion not attack? There is no answer. There is only the painting, still glowing in the dark after more than a century, still refusing to explain itself, still insisting that the impossible can happen, has happened, is happening now in the moonlight where you lie listening to this voice, safe beside your own invisible lions, sleeping the strange, protected sleep that Rousseau painted with such careful, inexplicable precision. That is the gift, not the answer, but the question, not the solution, but the stillness, not the knowledge, but the wonder that something so fragile as sleep and something so dangerous as a lion can share the same canvas, the same night, the same breath of peace. Rest now. The painting will still be there when you wake. The lion will still be standing. The woman will still be sleeping. And the moon will still be watching over both of them, just as it watches over you now, wherever you are, at whatever hour you have chosen to let this story carry you towards sleep.